Welcome to Crossdressing Stories. Here, we share personal stories, celebrate self-expression. If you're on your own journey or simply curious, you've found your community. Subscribe and join the conversation.
Eleanor Vance lived in a world of polished surfaces and flawless expectations. She was the wife of a rising politician, a woman who had constructed her life like a meticulous architect, where every room in their stately home, every social connection, was designed to project a perfect image of familial success and grace. But there was a crack in her masterpiece. That crack was her son, Finn. Finn wasn't a bad kid. He was bright, sensitive, but painfully withdrawn. He spent his summer break from boarding school lost in the digital worlds of online gaming, virtual realms where he could be a valiant knight or a powerful sorcerer. In the real world, he was awkward and anxious, with perpetually slumped shoulders and a gaze that rarely met in others. He was not the confident, athletic son a politician needed for campaign photos. To Eleanor, Finn was a quiet disappointment, an uncontrollable variable in her carefully calculated equation. The biggest opportunity of her husband's career was on the horizon, a potential run for governor. Eleanor knew the family image would be paramount, and she had just been handed what could be the perfect tool to cement that image. She had been invited to participate in a prestigious television documentary series called Mothers and Daughters, The Bond of the Future, which profiled influential women and their promising daughters. An appearance on the show would be a massive PR coup, painting Eleanor as the perfect matriarch, raising the next generation of leadership. It was a golden opportunity. There was just one problem. Eleanor didn't have a daughter. She sat in her home office, the soft lamplight illuminating the perfectly framed family photos. She looked at a picture of a younger Finn, before the awkwardness of adolescence had fully taken hold. He had her fine features, her large eyes, her soft hair. An idea began to form, an idea that was audacious, chilling, and utterly ruthless. It was born of a cold, pragmatic logic. Finn, as a son, was a failure. He didn't meet the required specifications. But perhaps he could succeed in a different role. A role she could shape. A role she could control. She called Finn into her office. He shuffled in, eyes on the floor, expecting another lecture about his grades or his screen time. "Finn, I have a new project for you," Eleanor said, her voice the smooth, persuasive purse she used on political donors. A kind of performance. A role that could change the future for this entire family. She turned her computer monitor towards him. On the screen was a professionally designed proposal, featuring images of smiling mothers and daughters. "I need you to help me tell a story," she said, her gaze cool and determined. "I need you, for the next 6 weeks, to become my daughter." Finn stared at the screen, then at his mother, the words not quite registering. It was so far outside the realm of possibility that his mind treated it as a joke, a bizarre and unfunny one. "What?" he stammered. What are you talking about?" "The producers of this documentary are looking for a compelling narrative," Eleanor explained, her tone shifting into a brisk, business-like cadence, as if she were outlining a marketing strategy. "And I will give them one. Elara. That will be your name. My reclusive, brilliant daughter, home from her exclusive boarding school in Switzerland. A little shy, artistically inclined, and devoted to her mother." She had already built the character. The thought was chilling. "No," Finn said, the word a small, firm island of defiance in his sea of anxiety. "No, Mom. I'm not doing that. It's insane." Eleanor's smooth, persuasive mask didn't slip, but her eyes grew cold. "Is it more insane than spending your entire summer locked in a dark room, achieving nothing? Is it more insane than the quiet disappointment your father feels every time he tries to have a conversation with you about the real world?" Each word was a precisely aimed dart. "This isn't about the real world. This is about you lying to everyone." Finn shot back, a rare flash of anger cutting through his usual passivity. "This is about our survival," she corrected him, her voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. "Your father's campaign is on a knife's edge. A single, powerful, positive story can push him over the top. This documentary is that story." Your performance will secure his future and, by extension, your own comfortable, privileged life. She leaned back in her chair, a look of finality on her face. So, you have a choice. You can be a part of this family's success in a role that, frankly, is better suited to your sensitive nature. You can play a part for 6 weeks, and we all reap the rewards. Or, you can refuse. She let the word hang in the air. And we can have a much more serious conversation with your father about whether your current boarding school, with its liberal arts and emotional support programs, is really the best use of our resources. There are other institutions. More disciplined ones. Military schools. The threat was unspoken but crystal clear. His one refuge, the school where he had a few quiet friends and could lose himself in his studies, was now a bargaining chip. His entire world was a cage, and she held the only key. He looked at his mother, at her perfectly composed face and her unyielding eyes, and he saw a stranger. He saw a woman who would not hesitate to follow through on her threat. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a familiar, hollow sense of resignation. He had been playing roles his whole life, the quiet son, the good student. What was one more? Fine, he whispered, the word tasting like defeat. I'll do it. Excellent, Eleanor said, her smile returning, as if a minor logistical issue had just been resolved. I knew you'd make the sensible choice. We'll begin tomorrow. A consultant will be here at 10. We need to start building Elara's foundation immediately. The consultant was a woman named Ms. Dubois, a severe, impeccably dressed woman with a steel-gray bob and an expression that suggested she had seen every form of human vanity and was impressed by none of it. She was, Eleanor explained, a discreet image and deportment specialist for the city's elite. Finn was instructed to stand in the center of the living room, a specimen under the harsh, critical light of the crystal chandelier. Ms. Dubois circled him slowly, her lips pursed. The raw material is workable, she announced, her voice a dry, clinical whisper. The bone structure is fine, delicate. He has his mother's eyes. But the posture is atrocious. And the hair is a tragedy. The first session was a systematic, almost brutal, deconstruction of Finn. His perpetually slumped shoulders were pushed back, his chin lifted. Miss Dubois used a long, thin wooden rod, tapping his spine, his shoulders, his chin, forcing him into a posture that felt unnatural and rigid. A young lady does not cower, she stated. She occupies her space with grace. Next came the hair. He was whisked away that afternoon to a private salon. His shaggy, overgrown hair was washed and then cut, not into a short, boyish style, but into a soft, layered bob that brushed his jawline. A few subtle, honey-colored highlights were added to give it warmth and dimension. The change was immediate and startling. The new hairstyle framed his face, softening his jaw and emphasizing his large, anxious eyes. But the most invasive procedure was the one Eleanor had arranged for that evening. A quiet, clinical esthetician arrived at the house. In the privacy of a guest bathroom, Finn was subjected to his first full-body waxing. The hot, sticky wax and the sharp, searing pain as it was ripped away was a profound and shocking violation. He lay on the table, biting his lip to keep from crying out, his body being forcibly smoothed and sculpted into a new, unfamiliar form. When it was over, his skin was red and raw, but also impossibly, disturbingly smooth. He felt alien in his own body. The final unveiling came the next morning. Finn was woken early and told to go to the guest room. Laid out on the bed was not his usual uniform of jeans and a hoodie, but a simple, cream-colored linen sundress and a pair of flat leather sandals. "This is Elara's at-home wear," Eleanor said from the doorway, her tone bright and casual. "Comfortable, but chic. Put it on." Finn stared at the dress, his stomach churning. I can't." Eleanor's smile tightened. "This is not a negotiation, Finn. The documentary film crew is arriving for their preliminary interview this afternoon. They will be meeting Elara. You will not disappoint me." Numbly, he did as he was told. He took off his own clothes and slipped the dress on. The fabric was light and airy, whispering against his newly smooth skin. It felt wrong. Deeply and profoundly wrong. He looked at his reflection in the full-length mirror. He saw a tall, painfully thin teenager with a soft bob, a smooth, hairless body, and a face that was a confused, androgynous mask. And he was wearing a dress. The figure in the mirror was a stranger, a ghost. It was the first time he had seen Elara, and the sight of her filled him with a sense of dread so deep it felt like he was drowning. The arrival of the documentary film crew solidified the nightmare, making it an undeniable, terrifying reality. The director, a warm, intelligent woman named Chloe, treated Elara with a gentle kindness that was somehow more painful than any cruelty. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Elara," Chloe said, shaking his hand. "Your mother has told us so much about you. She's incredibly proud." Finn, now Elara, could only nod, his throat too tight to speak. He sat beside his mother on the pristine white sofa, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, the linen dress a constant, scratchy reminder of his new skin. The preliminary interview was a masterclass in his mother's manipulative genius. Eleanor spun a beautiful, compelling story of her brilliant, shy daughter, educated in the finest Swiss schools, a talented painter, a hobby Eleanor had invented on the spot, who was now taking a year off before starting at the Sorbonne. "She's always been an old soul," Eleanor said, placing a gentle, proprietary hand on his knee, a gesture that made him flinch. "So introspective. I feel my most important role is to give her the space and support to find her own voice." The irony was so thick it was suffocating. After the film crew left, the real training began in earnest. Ms. Dubois returned for daily sessions. Finn was taught the intricate, unspoken language of a new gender. He learned to walk with smaller steps, to sit with his knees together, to gesture with his hands in a way that was fluid and contained, not clumsy and expansive. His voice was the biggest challenge. Eleanor hired a vocal coach who worked with him for hours, teaching him breathing exercises to pitch his voice higher, to soften his cadence, to end his sentences with a more approachable, upward inflection. The new voice felt like a stranger's in his own throat, thin and artificial. His evenings were no longer spent gaming. They were dedicated to character research. Eleanor curated a list of films for him to watch, all featuring classic, graceful actresses. "Watch Audrey Hepburn," she would instruct. "Notice her posture, her elegance. That is your model." The most difficult part was the constant correction. Every flicker of his old self was immediately identified and extinguished. "Elara, don't slouch. Elara, stop fiddling with your hands. Elara, a young lady does not mumble." He felt like he was being hollowed out, his own personality systematically scraped away and replaced with the polished, empty shell of Elara. He retreated further and further into himself, his silence becoming his only form of rebellion. One afternoon, Eleanor brought in a makeup artist. Finn was forced to sit in front of a mirror while the artist taught him and his mother how to apply a natural, youthful look. The feeling of the cool foundation, the tickle of the powder brush, the delicate, precise application of mascara, it was another layer of the artifice, another piece of the costume that was becoming his reality. "You have such beautiful long eyelashes," the makeup artist commented cheerfully. "Most girls would kill for them." Finn just stared at his reflection, at the pretty, sad-eyed stranger looking back at him. The long eyelashes, which he had always been secretly self-conscious of, were now another asset for Elara. Another piece of him that was being repurposed for her. He was not just being replaced, he was being cannibalized. As part of the documentary's narrative, Eleanor decided Elara needed a social context. A single, perfectly chosen friend who could speak to her character. The choice was, like everything else, a calculated one. Isabel, a quiet, intelligent girl who was the daughter of a prominent federal judge, a man Eleanor's husband desperately needed to impress, was invited for afternoon tea. Finn, now in full Elara costume, a simple but expensive floral dress, his hair artfully styled, sat in a state of quiet, agonizing dread as he waited for her to arrive. Isabel was not what he expected. She wasn't a bubbly socialite. She was a serious, thoughtful teenager with observant eyes and a slightly shy smile. She seemed just as uncomfortable with the formal tea setting as he was. Eleanor, of course, was in her element, guiding the conversation with a flawless, practiced charm. She spoke of Elara's supposed artistic talents, of her time in Switzerland. "Elara is so wonderfully creative," Eleanor said, smiling at Finn. "Aren't you, darling?" Finn could only nod, his eyes fixed on his teacup. Isabel seemed to sense his discomfort. "My dad says your father is thinking of running for governor," she said, her voice quiet, changing the subject. "That must be a lot." "It's a great honor," Eleanor interjected smoothly. But Isabel's gaze remained on Finn. "I just mean, it's a lot of pressure. For the family. Everyone is always watching you." For the first time, Finn felt a flicker of genuine connection. Here was someone who understood the feeling of being an accessory to a parent's ambition. He risked looking up, meeting her eyes for a brief second. "Yes," he said, and his own, quiet voice, not Elara's practiced one, slipped out. "It is." The conversation was stilted and awkward, but a tiny, fragile seed of something real had been planted. After that first meeting, Eleanor encouraged them to spend more time together, always under her careful, watchful eye. They would take chaperoned walks in the garden or sit in the library, ostensibly discussing classic literature for the documentary cameras. During these sessions, Finn discovered that he and Isabel shared a quiet, nerdy sensibility. They talked about history, about books, about the video games Finn secretly still played in the dead of night. He had to be careful, filtering his own interests through the persona of Elara, but he found he could be more himself with Isabel than with anyone else. She was fascinated by Elara's mind. "You think about things differently than other girls," she said one afternoon as they discussed a historical novel. "You analyze things, like a strategist." The comment was a jolt, a reminder of the deep, deceptive game he was playing. He was lying to the one person who had shown him a sliver of genuine understanding. The guilt was a constant, bitter taste in his mouth. Their friendship, manufactured by his mother for political gain, was becoming the one real, authentic thing in his life. And that authenticity was becoming the most dangerous threat to the entire charade. He was starting to care what Isabel thought of him. And he knew, with a certainty that terrified him, that she was falling for a girl who didn't exist. The 6-week production schedule for the documentary was a relentless crucible. Finn's life became a tightly scripted performance, every public appearance, every filmed candid moment, carefully orchestrated by his mother. He was Elara now more often than he was himself. The dresses, the makeup, the soft, lilting voice, they were becoming a second skin. His friendship with Isabel deepened, a secret garden in the middle of the carefully manicured desert of his life. They started exchanging texts, late-night conversations that were far more honest than their chaperone meetings. She would complain about the pressures of being a judge's daughter. He, as Elara, would offer carefully worded, empathetic replies that were, in reality, his own. The turning point came during a large, formal garden party at their home, a key event for the documentary and for his father's burgeoning campaign. Finn was on display, the perfect daughter, dressed in a pale yellow dress, moving gracefully through the crowd of political donors and society figures. He and Isabel found a moment of quiet refuge on a stone bench at the far end of the garden, hidden from the main party by a large hedge. The sound of the string quartet and polite chatter was a distant murmur. "I hate this," Isabel confessed in a low whisper, looking at the glittering party. "All the smiling. The pretending. It's so fake." "I know," Finn said, the words slipping out with a weariness that was all his own. Isabel turned to him, her expression serious in the soft evening light. "Sometimes," she said, her voice barely audible, "I feel like I'm playing a part. Like the Isabel everyone sees isn't the real me. Do you ever feel like that, Elara?" The question was a direct hit, a moment of pure, unintentional truth-seeking that left him breathless. He looked at her kind, intelligent face, at the genuine trust in her eyes. And in that moment, the weight of the deception became too much to bear. The need to be seen, to be truly seen by this one person, overwhelmed the fear. He made a split-second, reckless decision. "I have to tell you something," he whispered, his heart hammering. And you have to promise, you have to swear, you won't tell anyone. Of course, she said, her eyes wide with concern. He took a deep, shaky breath. My name, he said, his voice dropping to its natural, quiet tenor, a sound she had never heard before, is not Elara. It's Finn. Isabel just stared at him, the silence between them profound. The distant music of the party seemed to fade away. He saw a storm of emotions cross her face, utter confusion, disbelief, a flicker of something that looked like hurt. Finn, she repeated, the name a strange, foreign sound on her lips. Your brother? No, he said, the final, terrifying piece of the truth catching in his throat. He looked down at his own hands, resting on the fabric of the yellow dress. There is no Elara. There's only me. He risked a glance at her face. He expected her to stand up, to run, to scream. He expected disgust, betrayal, anger. He was prepared for the end of the only real friendship he had. Instead, she just sat there, completely still, her intelligent eyes searching his, trying to reconcile the boy's voice and the impossible confession with the girl who had been her friend for the past month. Why? She finally whispered, her voice tight. It wasn't the question he had expected. So he told her. In a rushed, desperate torrent of whispers, he explained the whole, sordid story. His father's campaign, his mother's ambition, the documentary, the threat of military school. He told her about the consultants, the training, the constant, soul-crushing performance. Isabel listened, her expression shifting from disbelief to a dawning, horrified understanding. She wasn't looking at a liar. She was looking at a prisoner. The hurt in her eyes was replaced by a fierce, protective anger, not at him, but for him. She threatened you? Isabel breathed, her voice filled with outrage. She forced you into all of this? I didn't have a choice, Finn whispered, the shame of his own powerlessness washing over him. That's monstrous, she said, shaking her head. That's not just lying. It's abuse. Hearing the word, a word he had never dared to think, spoken by someone else, was a shock. It validated the deep, unspoken wrongness he had been living with for weeks. She was silent for a long moment, the sharp, analytical mind she'd inherited from her father clearly working. This documentary, she said slowly. Your mother thinks it's her greatest weapon. To create the perfect family image. She looked at him, a new, steely glint in her eye. But a lie this big, if it were to come out at the right moment, a politician and his wife building their perfect family image on a lie this monstrous, it wouldn't just hurt the campaign. It would destroy it. A new, terrifying possibility began to dawn on Finn. He had confessed out of a desperate need for honesty. But Isabel, the judge's daughter, saw it as evidence. A case to be built. What are you saying? He asked. I'm saying, she whispered, leaning closer, that we're not going to let her win. You keep playing the part. Be the perfect, dutiful Elara. Don't let her suspect a thing. But we are going to be watching. We are going to be listening. And we are going to find a way to tell the truth at the moment it will have the most impact. It was a conspiracy, a secret alliance forged in the shadows of a garden party. Finn was no longer alone in his deception. He now had a co-conspirator. But the stakes had just been raised exponentially. This was no longer just about his own survival. It was about taking down his mother's entire, perfectly constructed world. The thought was both terrifying and, for the first time in a long time, exhilarating. He had a friend. And he had a plan. The final 2 weeks of filming were a masterclass in espionage. Finn was no longer just playing one role. He was playing two. Outwardly, he was Elara, the dutiful, quiet daughter, performing for his mother and the documentary cameras. But inwardly, he was Finn, a co-conspirator, gathering information and coordinating with his secret ally. The alliance with Isabel changed everything. The loneliness that had been crushing him was replaced by a sense of shared purpose. They communicated through a secret, encrypted chat app, exchanging information and planning their strategy under the guise of texting about homework. Isabel was a brilliant strategist. We need proof, she texted him one night. Something undeniable. Your word against hers isn't enough. They'll just say you're a troubled teen. So Finn became a spy in his own home. He started using his phone to secretly record his mother's coaching sessions. He captured the audio of her cold, precise instructions, her casual threats, her chilling reminders of his dependency. Elara, your smile looks forced. Do it again. Remember, Finn, this conversation is about your father's education policy. Don't offer any of your own strange opinions. If you make one mistake at the luncheon tomorrow, you and I will be having a very serious discussion about your fall semester. Each recording was a small, dangerous victory, a piece of ammunition for a war he was preparing to fight. He would transfer the files to Isabel, who kept them in a secure, password-protected folder. The double performance was exhausting. He had to be the perfect, pliant Elara for his mother, while simultaneously being the cunning, rebellious Finn for Isabel. The mental gymnastics were dizzying. There were moments when he almost broke. During a filmed mother-daughter painting session, a scene Eleanor had invented to showcase Elara's artistic soul, his mother was being particularly effusive for the cameras. I've always believed in nurturing her creative spirit, Eleanor said to the director, smiling warmly as she watched Finn awkwardly dab paint on a canvas. It's so important for a young woman to have a voice. The hypocrisy was so staggering that Finn felt a surge of hysterical laughter bubble up inside him. He choked it down, converting it into a shy, demure smile for the camera, just as he had been taught. He could feel Isabel, who was also present for the scene as Elara's friend, watching him with a look of shared, secret understanding. That look was the only thing that got him through the afternoon. As the final day of filming approached, Isabel laid out the plan. The documentary's climax was to be a live-to-tape interview with a respected national journalist. It was meant to be Eleanor and her husband's triumphant final pitch to the voters, with their perfect daughter sitting silently and supportively beside them. That's our moment, Isabel texted. The interview is live-streamed. Once the story is out, they can't edit it. They can't spin it. It will be undeniable. What do I have to do? Finn texted back, his fingers trembling. You don't have to do anything, she replied. I will. I'll be in the audience as your guest. I will ask the first question during the Q&A session. I will ask your mother to tell the world the truth about Elara. And I will have the recordings ready to send to every major news outlet in the country the second she tries to lie. Finn stared at the plan. It was perfect. It was terrifying. He wasn't the one who had to pull the trigger. He just had to sit there, in his final performance as Elara, and watch as the world he had been trapped in was brought crashing down around him. The day of the live interview was thick with a heavy, theatrical tension. The living room had been transformed into a professional television studio, with bright lights, multiple cameras, and a small, socially distanced studio audience comprised of family friends and political supporters. For his final performance, Eleanor had chosen Elara's most symbolic costume. It was a dress in a soft, dove-gray color, with a high neckline, long sleeves, and a cut that was both modest and incredibly elegant. It was the dress of a quiet, supportive, and utterly unimpeachable daughter. As his mother zipped him into the dress, her hands cool and efficient on his back, he felt a strange, cold calm settle over him. The fear was still there, a low hum beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a sense of finality. This was the last time. The makeup artist applied the final, perfect mask of Elara. As he looked at his reflection at the soft hair, the large, expressive eyes, the neutral, pleasant mouth, he didn't see a stranger anymore. He saw a character he had played, a role he was about to shed. Isabel arrived, dressed in a simple, dark dress, her face the mask of quiet composure. She was seated in the front row of the small audience as Elara's best friend. She met Finn's eyes for a brief moment, and in that shared glance was a world of terror and resolve. The interview began. The journalist, a seasoned professional, guided Senator Vance and Eleanor through a series of questions about their policies, their vision for the state, and their family values. Eleanor was flawless, a portrait of maternal warmth and political savvy. Finn, as Elara, sat beside her, a silent, graceful prop, his hands folded in his lap, his expression one of serene, supportive adoration. He played his part to perfection. He could feel his heart hammering against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat counting down the seconds. He knew the plan. After the main interview, the journalist would open the floor to 1 or 2 questions from the friends and family audience. That was Isabel's cue. And finally, Mrs. Vance, the journalist said, turning to Eleanor with a warm smile. Your daughter, Elara, is a picture of grace. What is the one piece of advice you would give to other mothers hoping to raise such a confident and poised young woman? It was the perfect softball question, designed to end the interview on a high, inspirational note. Thank you, Eleanor said, her smile radiant as she placed a hand on Finn's shoulder. I've always believed that the most important thing is to listen to your child, to see who they truly are, and to give them the love and support to become the best version of themselves. The lie was so profound, so audacious, that it took Finn's breath away. We'll now take one question from the audience, the journalist announced. This was it. Finn's entire body tensed. He watched as Isabel's hand went up. The journalist nodded towards her. Yes, the young lady in the front row. Isabel stood up, her voice clear and steady in the quiet room. Thank you, she said. My name is Isabel, and I am a friend of the family. My question is for Mrs. Vance. She paused, her gaze locking with Eleanor's. Mrs. Vance, could you please tell us the truth about your son, Finn? The name Finn hung in the air, a grenade with the pin pulled. For a split second, there was absolute, stunned silence. The cameras remained fixed. The journalist's professional smile froze on her face. Eleanor Vance, for the first time in her impeccably managed life, was caught completely off guard. A flicker of pure, animal panic flashed in her eyes before being instantly suppressed by a lifetime of practice control. I'm sorry, Eleanor said, her voice a tight, brittle imitation of her usual warmth. I think you must be mistaken. As you can see, I have a daughter, Elara. She gave Finn's shoulder a reassuring squeeze, a gesture that was meant to be comforting but felt like a vice. The journalist, sensing a story far more explosive than she had anticipated, turned to Isabel. Perhaps you could clarify your question? Of course, Isabel said, her voice unwavering. She reached into her purse, but she didn't pull out a phone. She pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. I have a follow-up question. This is a printout of the student roster for the St. Augustine's Academy for Boys. There's a student listed here, a scholarship student, named Finn Vance. He bears a remarkable resemblance to Elara. Could you explain this discrepancy? The lie was brilliant in its cruelty. There was no printout. Isabel was bluffing, creating a fiction to corner a liar. Eleanor's composure finally began to crack. A faint sheen of sweat appeared on her upper lip. That's absurd, she stammered. This is clearly a malicious attempt to disrupt my husband's campaign. This young woman is no friend of the family. I have recordings. Isabel's words were quiet, almost conversational, but they landed with the force of a physical blow. The bluff was over. This was the real threat. Recordings of your coaching sessions with your son, Isabel continued, her gaze still locked on Eleanor. Recordings of you threatening him, instructing him, forcing him to become Elara. Would you like me to play them for the journalist? Or would you rather just tell the truth? The room was in an uproar. The journalist was speaking urgently into her earpiece. The cameras, which had been focused on the family, now swung to capture the quiet, steely-eyed girl in the front row. Senator Vance looked from his wife to Elara, his face a mask of dawning, horrified comprehension. He had been a willing participant in a lie, but he clearly had not known the depths of his wife's coercion. Eleanor was trapped. The architect, the master manipulator, had been perfectly, completely outmaneuvered. She looked at Isabel, then at her husband, then finally, her gaze fell upon the quiet, gray-clad figure beside her. She looked at her creation. She looked at her son. And in that moment, all Finn could see in his mother's eyes was not hatred, not anger, but a look of profound, chilling betrayal. Not because he had exposed her, but because her perfect, beautiful, and compliant daughter had, in the end, been a failure too. Elara had a will of her own. He stood up. The cameras all swung to him. The entire room, the entire live-streamed world, held its breath, waiting to hear what the girl in the gray dress had to say. He looked at his mother, at the ruins of her perfect world. And then he looked directly into the main camera. He opened his mouth, and with a voice that was not Finn's and not Elara's, but something new, something quiet, steady, and finally, irrevocably his own, he began to speak. "My name is Finn Vance," he said. "And I have a story to tell you." The story Finn told was not angry or vindictive. He spoke in a quiet, matter-of-fact monotone, his hands clasped in front of him, the picture of a calm, credible witness. He didn't accuse, he simply recounted. He told them about the meeting in his mother's office, about the threat of military school. He described the consultants, the painful waxing, the hours spent practicing a new way to walk and talk. He spoke of the guilt he felt lying to Isabel, the one person who had shown him kindness. He didn't need to embellish. The simple, unadorned truth was more damning than any accusation. As he spoke, the last vestiges of Elara fell away. He was no longer playing a part. He was simply a teenager, telling the world about the impossible, terrifying thing his mother had made him do. The live stream, which was supposed to be a piece of polished political propaganda, had become a raw, riveting, and utterly catastrophic reality show. Online, the story was exploding. The clip of Isabel's question, followed by Finn's quiet confession, was going viral. The hashtag #FreeFinn was trending worldwide before he had even finished speaking. When he was done, he sat down. The silence in the room was once again absolute. The journalist, her face a mask of professional shock, turned to Eleanor. "Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice tight. "Do you have any response to your son's testimony?" Eleanor Vance looked like a porcelain doll that had been dropped and shattered. Her perfect smile was gone, her face pale and slack. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She had built her entire life on a narrative she could control. Now, the narrative had been stolen from her, and she was left with nothing. Her husband, Senator Vance, finally moved. He stood up, his face ashen. He looked at his son, then at his wife, a look of profound, soul-deep shame on his face. He walked to the center of the makeshift stage. "There is no excuse," he said, his voice a broken whisper, speaking not to the cameras, but to his son. "There is no excuse for what we have done. My political career is over. And it should be." He looked out at the silent, stunned audience. "I have failed as a husband, and I have failed unforgivably as a father." He then turned and walked out of the room, not as a politician, but as a defeated man. The interview was over. The documentary was over. The campaign was over. In the ensuing chaos, as the crew and the stunned guests began to speak in hushed, urgent tones, Finn just sat there. He felt strangely empty. The great, terrifying climax he had been building towards had happened, and he had survived. Isabel came and stood beside him. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. "I don't know," he said honestly. He looked down at his gray dress. It felt like a costume from a play that had just ended. He had won. He was free. But he had no idea who he was supposed to be now. The boy he had been before Elara felt like a stranger. And Elara, she was just a ghost. He was left in the middle, a person who was neither and both. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The documentary was shelved, but the raw, unedited footage of the interview was leaked online within hours. The Vance political dynasty was not just tarnished, it was vaporized. Senator Vance formally withdrew from the governor's race and announced his retirement from public life. Eleanor Vance disappeared. She retreated into the perfect, silent house, refusing all calls, a ghost in her own self-made museum. The world, having been captivated by the drama, now turned its intense, fickle spotlight onto Finn. He became a reluctant icon, a symbol for, well, nobody was quite sure. For speaking truth to power? For the complexities of gender identity? For the victims of narcissistic parenting? He was a blank slate onto which everyone projected their own narrative. He was inundated with offers, talk shows, book deals, interviews. He turned them all down. The last thing he wanted was more performance. Isabel and her father, the judge, became his anchors in the storm. Judge Morgan, a man of quiet integrity, was appalled by what had happened. He helped Finn navigate the legal and practical complexities of his new life, ensuring he had access to therapy and a safe place to land. Finn moved out of his mother's house and, for a time, lived with Isabel's family. The contrast was stark. The Morgan household was a place of warm, chaotic intellectual debate, of shared meals and easy laughter. It was a home, not a stage set. He and Isabel were inseparable. Their strange, secret alliance had forged a bond of profound, unshakable trust. She was the only person who had seen all the versions of him, the anxious, quiet Finn, the graceful, sad Elara, and the emerging, uncertain person he was now. One afternoon, they were in Isabel's room, sorting through a box of clothes she was donating. "What are you going to do now?" she asked gently. "About everything." "I don't know," he confessed. He was back in his own clothes, jeans and a t-shirt, but they felt strange, ill-fitting, like a costume of a boy he used to be. The 6 weeks as Elara had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. He found he missed certain things. He missed the quiet grace of Elara's movements. He missed the softness of the fabric she wore. He had been taught a new language of being, and he couldn't simply unlearn it. "You know," Isabel said, pulling a soft, gray cashmere sweater from the box. "This was always too big for me." She handed it to him. "Maybe you don't have to choose. You don't have to be Finn or Elara. You can just be you." He took the sweater. The cashmere was soft and comforting in his hands. He thought about what she had said. For his entire life, he had been trying to fit into a role defined by others: the son, the student, Elara. Maybe the goal wasn't to find the right role. Maybe it was to write his own. The months that followed were a quiet, tentative exploration. Finn, with the steadfast support of Isabel and the professional guidance of a therapist, began the slow, difficult process of integrating the disparate parts of himself. He didn't go back to boarding school. The thought of returning to that old, rigidly defined world felt impossible. Instead, he finished his high school credits online, a process that gave him the freedom and anonymity to figure things out. His wardrobe became a quiet battlefield of identity. He didn't want to wear dresses again; they were too tied to the trauma of the performance. But he couldn't go back to just jeans and hoodies. He found himself drawn to softer fabrics, to more fluid silhouettes. He started wearing soft cashmere sweaters like the one Isabel had given him, tailored trousers with a more elegant drape, and simple, well-made leather boots. His style became something new, a blend of the masculine and the feminine, a quiet expression of the person he was becoming. He let his hair grow out, not into the styled bob of Elara, but into its own natural, wavy state, falling just past his ears. He found he liked the softness of it. He was not trying to be a girl. He was simply letting go of the rigid expectations of being a boy. The performance had been a prison, but it had also, paradoxically, been a kind of liberation. It had shown him that the strict, binary rules of gender he had been raised with were a construct, a costume that could be taken off. He and Isabel started a popular YouTube channel. It wasn't about the scandal. It was called The Unwritten Rulebook, a thoughtful, witty series where they explored the unspoken social and historical rules that govern our lives, from fashion and etiquette to the constructs of gender itself. Finn, who had once been terrified of speaking, found his voice. He was articulate, insightful, and his unique, first-hand experience gave him a perspective that was utterly compelling. The channel was a surprise hit. People were drawn to his quiet intelligence and his gentle, androgynous presence. He was not Finn the victim, or Elara the lie. He was Finn, a thoughtful, interesting person who was navigating the world on his own terms. He rarely saw his parents. His father had sent a single, handwritten letter of apology, a broken, heartfelt confession of his own weakness and regret. Finn had read it, acknowledged the pain within it, and put it away. Forgiveness was a landscape he was not yet ready to explore. He had not heard from his mother at all. The perfect house, he had heard, was up for sale. One day, a comment appeared on their latest video. It was from a young, transgender fan. "Thank you," the comment read. "I've never seen anyone talk about this stuff in this way. You're not trans, I know, but you get it. You make me feel seen." Finn stared at the comment for a long time. He had spent 6 weeks feeling completely invisible, erased. The idea that his painful, traumatic experience could now make someone else feel seen was a revelation. It was a strange, beautiful, and unexpected form of alchemy. He had taken the lead of his mother's cruel performance and, with Isabel's help, was slowly, carefully, spinning it into gold. A year after the interview, Finn was on his way to meet Isabel at a university library. He was taking a few introductory college courses, exploring his options, his future a page he was slowly beginning to write. He was navigating the quiet, book-lined corridors when he heard a voice that made him freeze. Of course, the capital investment is significant, but the long-term ROI is undeniable. It was his mother's voice. That smooth, persuasive, perfectly modulated purr. He looked around the corner of a bookshelf. There, in a small meeting room with glass walls, was Eleanor Vance. She looked different, smaller. The impeccable designer suit was gone, replaced by a simple, conservative blouse and skirt. Her hair was still perfectly styled, but there was a weariness in her posture he had never seen before. She was pitching a proposal to a group of university administrators. She had, apparently, reinvented herself as an educational fundraising consultant. Finn stood in the shadows, watching the silent movie of his mother's new life through the glass. She was still performing, still selling a narrative. But the stage was smaller now, the audience less glamorous. As the meeting concluded, she walked out into the hallway. For a moment, she didn't see him. Then, her eyes scanned the corridor and landed on him. Time seemed to stop. They stood there, 10 feet apart, two strangers who knew each other's deepest secrets. He saw a flicker of the old, cold anger in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by something else, something he had never seen before, a look of raw, unveiled shock. She wasn't looking at Finn, the awkward boy. She wasn't looking at Elara, the fictional girl. She was looking at the person he had become. A confident, self-possessed young adult with soft, shoulder-length hair, wearing an elegant gray sweater and tailored trousers, their gaze direct and unafraid. He was a person who did not fit into any of the boxes she had ever tried to put him in. He was her son, but he was also a stranger. He saw the subtle, almost imperceptible shift in her expression as she took in his appearance. It was the look of an architect, seeing a building she had designed, which had then been radically and beautifully renovated by someone else. A look of confusion, of resentment, and a tiny, buried flicker of what might have been grudging admiration. She opened her mouth, as if to speak, but no words came. What was there to say? The character she had written was gone, and the actor had rewritten the entire play. Finn just held her gaze for a long moment. He didn't feel anger anymore. He didn't feel hatred. He just felt a vast, weary sadness for this woman who had been so terrified of imperfection that she had tried to destroy her own son to achieve it. He gave her a single, small, and final nod. It was not a gesture of forgiveness. It was a gesture of dismissal. An acknowledgement that their story was, at last, truly over. He then turned and walked away, not looking back, leaving her standing alone in the quiet, echoing hallway. The encounter with his mother, as unsettling as it was, served as a final, clean break. The ghost of her influence was, at last, exorcised. Finn felt a new sense of peace and a new freedom to explore the person he was becoming without the shadow of the past. The journey of self-discovery, however, was leading him to an unexpected and confusing destination. The further he moved from the trauma of the Elara project, the more he found himself missing her. It wasn't a longing for the performance or the deception. It was something deeper. He missed the quiet grace of her movements, which had felt more natural to him than his own former clumsiness. He missed the softness of the clothes, which had been a comfort. The persona his mother had forced upon him had been a lie, but it had been built around a kernel of an unspoken truth he was only now beginning to confront. He was having conversations with his therapist, not about the trauma, but about identity. About the strange, persistent feeling that the androgynous, gentle person he was now was still not quite complete. The character of Elara, his therapist said one day, was a role you were forced into. But is it possible that your mother, in her own monstrous way, saw a part of you that you yourself hadn't been ready to see? The question hung in the air, both terrifying and liberating. That night, he couldn't sleep. He got up and went into a small, private bathroom. He looked at his reflection. He saw Finn, the survivor, with the longish hair and the soft sweater. But he also saw an echo of Elara in the softness of his features, a lingering ghost. On a reckless, intuitive impulse, he opened his laptop and found one of the old makeup tutorials he had been forced to watch. His hands were trembling, but he followed the familiar steps. A light foundation. A touch of concealer. A single, careful coat of mascara. He didn't use the lipstick. He just looked. The person looking back at him from the mirror was neither Finn nor Elara. It was someone new. Someone who felt right. The makeup didn't feel like a costume. It felt like an enhancement, a way of bringing an inner truth to the outer surface. He went to his closet and pulled out a simple, soft, gray dress Isabel had given him from her donation box months ago, one he had kept hidden at the back. It was a comfortable, unassuming jersey dress. He took off his sweater and trousers and slipped it on. He stood in front of the full-length mirror, his heart pounding. And he saw her. Not Elara, the tragic, constructed doll. This was someone else. Someone calmer. Someone more real. The reflection didn't feel like a lie. It felt like a homecoming. Tears began to stream down his face. They were not tears of sadness or of trauma. They were tears of profound, earth-shattering recognition. His mother, in her cruel, narcissistic quest for the perfect daughter, had been a monstrously bad architect. But she had been building on a foundation that was already there. She had stumbled, completely by accident, upon the truest, most deeply buried part of her child's soul. The performance had been a prison. But it had also, in the most twisted, unintentional way, been the key that had finally unlocked the door. The journey from that moment of private revelation was not instantaneous or easy, but it was, for the first time, honest. The process was no longer about deception or performance, it was about integration and acceptance. With the help of his therapist, a supportive gender identity group, and the unwavering, unconditional love of Isabel, Finn began a new, more authentic transformation. It started with a name. Finn was the boy who had been hurt. Elara was the role that had been forced upon her. She needed a name that was her own, a name that felt like the person in the mirror. She chose Wren for the small, resilient bird known for its beautiful song. She began a low-dose hormone regimen, this time not as a tool of coercion, but as an act of self-love, a way to align her body with the truth she now understood. The changes were slow, gentle, a welcome affirmation rather than a terrifying alteration. Her style evolved into something that was authentically hers, a blend of soft, elegant fabrics and clean, simple lines. It was the grace of Elara, but without the trauma, infused with the quiet, intellectual confidence of Finn. The final, most terrifying step was telling her father. He had been a quiet, distant source of support since the scandal, respecting her privacy, sending money, but keeping his emotional distance. She invited him to meet her for coffee. She was sitting at a small outdoor table when he arrived. She was wearing a simple, dark green dress and her hair was tied back in a low ponytail. She looked calm, poised, and completely, authentically herself. He stopped when he saw her. He had been expecting his son. He looked at her for a long, silent moment, taking in the dress, the subtle changes in her face, the quiet confidence in her eyes. "Finn?" he asked, his voice hesitant. "Not anymore," she said, her voice a soft, steady alto. "My name is Wren." She told him everything. Not the story of the performance, but the story of the person she had discovered underneath it. She spoke not of trauma, but of homecoming. Her father listened, his face a mask of complex, unreadable emotions. When she was done, he was quiet for a long time. Wren braced herself for confusion, for rejection, for the final, painful severing of a bond that was already so frayed. "Your mother," he finally said, his voice thick with a deep, weary regret. "She was a brilliant, cruel woman. She always saw people as pieces on a chessboard to be moved for her own advantage. He looked at his child, at the beautiful, resilient person sitting before him. It seems the one time she was right was for all the wrong reasons. He reached across the table and hesitantly, gently, took her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Ren," he said, a look of profound, sorrowful acceptance in his eyes. "I'm sorry it took so long." A few weeks later, Ren and Isabel posted a new video on their channel. It was titled, simply, An Introduction. Ren sat before the camera, not as Finn, not as Elara, but as herself. "I've been playing a lot of roles in my life," she said, a small, genuine smile on her lips. "The quiet son, the perfect daughter. And I think I'm done with roles." She looked directly into the camera, her gaze clear and unafraid. "So I just wanted to take a minute to introduce myself. My name is Ren. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." The video was not a scandal. It was a quiet, powerful statement of truth. She was not a victim, not a symbol, not a story created by someone else. She was just Ren. And for the first time in her life, that was more than enough.